And that brings us to Majora's Mask, which, oh god, is the opposite problem. People have some mixed feelings about some of the dungeons in this game. In this game, okay, the first two, I see most people kind of agree on. It's the second two that people seem to completely change depending on who you ask.
Really? I seem to feel that opinions are pretty well accepted of the first two dungeons are just okay at best. Great Bay Temple is horrible, and Stone Tower is one of the best dungeons in the series.
I've actually seen quite a few people flip-flop those last two, believe it or not.
Really?
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people do that. You're right, the majority do like the Stone Tower, and the majority don't like the Great Bay, but there are a surprising amount of advocates towards Great Bay Temple, and I know this because I'm one of them.
Oh. That makes it interesting.
But before we get to that, Woodfall, like you said, it's just kind of meh. It exists.
It's average.
I want to say C tier just because there's nothing. Again, first dungeon syndrome. There's nothing wrong with it, but there's nothing spectacular.
Yeah, I wouldn't really call Woodfall Temple bad. I do at least remember a few things that I liked. But other than that,
It's just one of those dungeons that just kind of exists. Also, you said you played Majora's Mask 3D, but I remember you saying you played the original, but you only got up to Woodfall?
Yeah, I never actually went into the dungeon, but...
Okay. Because a big factor in Majora's Mask that you have to consider is if you're playing the 3DS version, there are a lot of changes compared to Ocarina of Time. Like, a lot of changes.
Yeah.
It is much more of an overhaul to the core of the game. And that holds true especially for the bosses, because they're more straightforward in 3D, and that's not always a good thing. However, Woodfall is kind of the only dungeon where I would say the opposite is true, and they actually kind of made it better. I actually prefer Adalwa in 3D, because in the original, there's like nothing to it. You kind of just walk up to him, whack him, and he dies. That's kind of it. He doesn't really do anything. Whereas in 3D, like there's actual steps you have to take before you can damage him. In the original, you can literally just walk up and slash at him, and he will die. It's stupid easy, and there's no strategy to it whatsoever.
I mean, I don't really consider myself an Odala fan to begin with, so...
I mean, neither do I, but, like, at least you're actually doing something in the 3DS version.
Yeah.
In the original, you're just kind of... It's like fighting a large, normal enemy. The strategy is basically the same. You just walk up to it, whack it, and don't get hit by what it does. That's it. But that brings us to what's it called? Snowhead? I always forget. I always forget what it's called. But,
Not to be confused with me.
But, yeah, I don't really hear many people talk about this place, and I honestly don't know why. I really like it.
I want to really like it, but it's tedious.
How so? I haven't really heard people say anything good or bad about this place, just that it exists.
One room, that central room that's really tall, and if you fall down, you have to climb all the way back up.
Okay, yeah, I can agree with that. I can agree with that wholeheartedly. Especially the part where you have to, like, ride the wall as a Goron.
Yeah, it's not even about it.
It's easy to bounce and, like, mess up, and you'll have to climb all the way back up, and that is kind of annoying. That being said, visually, I really like this place. I love the Goron costume as a whole. The boss is amazing. I freaking love the boss. It's my favorite boss in the game, easily. Like, it's not even close.
I would say that's probably my favorite boss, too.
There's just something mindlessly entertaining about chasing a bull around a giant donut. there's nothing about this says that it should be fun, but it is. But yeah, I think I'm gonna put this in B tier, because like you said, that is kind of annoying. If you fall, it is kind of irritating. Beyond that, this place has some good set pieces. Also, is this the only ice dungeon that has, like, fire elements?
Is it?
It's the only one I can think of that does both, like, at the same time. Like, there are ice dungeons and there are fire dungeons, and Snowheart is, like, the only Zelda dungeon I can think of that does both. Correct me in the comments if I'm wrong about that, but it's the only one that I can remember. And for that, it's just interesting to me. Also, just... Goron Link is fun.
Yeah. I think there might be some in the 2D games that...
Maybe in, like, the Oracle games or something, but I don't know.
I was actually kind of thinking a link between worlds.
Oh, yeah, you're right. There is one, I think. Isn't there?
I think so. I
remember yeah, I think you're right.
I specifically remembering using the fire rod to melt some ice in the ice palace.
Well, that's just like using an item. It's kind of the same thing as using a fire arrow in here. I mean, this place has like actual rooms that are lava.
That's true.
But oh boy, now it's time for the discussion heavy one, because we're on to Great Bay. I believe you ranked this as your worst dungeon in the series?
Yep, this is the only dungeon that I personally put in F tier.
Also, let me clarify that every time I say in the series, I mean in the 3D games, because if I clarify that every time, we would add like another half hour to this video.
I mean, to be fair, I would still say it's the worst in the series.
Oh.
Actually, no. I just remembered a different dungeon exists, so...
I just remembered that most of Zelda 2 exists.
I just remembered that the Temple of the Ocean King...
Oh boy, don't get me fucking started on that place.
But back to Great Bay Temple, it is very confusing, very easy to get lost, get swept up in the currents. I don't like it. The only positive I really give this place is you get to use Zora Link a lot, and that's about it. That's
the one thing that I hear people almost universally agree on, is the fact that Zora Link is really cool and you use them a lot in here. Other than that, I actually see quite a few mixed opinions. Honestly, I put this place in C, I think, personally. But
Really?
I put it in either C or B. But I'm willing to say D. Maybe C, but I think I'll compromise with D. Just because when people do complain about it, I see what they're getting at. I don't agree with those complaints, but I understand why they would think that. This is, without a doubt, the most non-linear dungeon in the series, 3D-wise, by far. Like, it's not even close. There is so much you have to actively think about to do anything in here. There's more ongoing mental effort required in this dungeon than any other dungeon in the series. And while I get why that is annoying for a lot of people, because it is very confusing and very easy to get lost, I kinda like it for that. It's a welcome challenge for me.
Okay.
Also, and this is why I'm willing to compromise D. Gjorg in the 3DS version is so freaking frustrating.
Yeah, I don't remember if I've clarified this yet, but I've only played through Majora's Mask 3D, and if you remember back to like 5 years ago, I talked about it in one of my countdowns about the 3DS version of Gjorg being... Yikes!
Yeah, it's awful. It's extremely irritating. And to think, this is one of the weird, baffling things about it to me, because, like, people complained about Gjorg before the 3DS remake. I really want to make sure people know that, because, like, This was not a liked boss before, and it is, like, universally accepted that the remake somehow made it worse. I don't know how they managed to take a boss that nobody liked to begin with, and not only not improve it or fix any of the problems people had with it, but take all of the problems people had with it and make them worse. It's just not an enjoyable boss fight. I can tolerate it in the original. I don't hate it, I don't really love it. I don't think it's as bad as people say, but the 3DS version deserves the hate it gets. It's awful. And, also, we were talking about this in DMs, like, a couple hours ago, but, Zora Link.
Yeah. This is one where our opinions actually flip-flop, because you like Great Bay Temple, I don't like Great Bay Temple, I like 3DS Zora Link, you think it's a downgrade.
Yeah. To be fair, we should probably make it clear that you have not played as Zora Link in the original.
That is true.
So you don't have much to compare it from other than just secondhand what you've seen.
Yes.
As someone who started with the original, they made it worse, trust me. Trust me, they made it worse. I hate so much the fact that they tied magic to swimming fast. That's so dumb. In a dungeon where you already have to swim around 90% of it, you're gonna want to be able to get to where you're going fast, especially because the Great Bay Temple is huge. It's a very large dungeon, and it takes a while to get from point A to point B. You're gonna want to do so quickly. Doing that quickly, consuming your magic meter, is literally just an added frustration that doesn't need to exist. And in the original, it doesn't exist.
I can kind of see what you're saying, but personally, I prefer the 2-speed version of Zora Link. I think having that tied to a button going fast, I think that actually makes him more controllable. Granted, I don't have much to personally compare it to other than what I've seen, but I think that works for Great Bay Temple because it's so large and it's very maze-like in its design, and especially with those currents that are easy to get swept up in, having more control makes it better, I think.
That's the thing, because I do think the dungeon itself, like, if we're just taking the dungeon and not the gameplay into consideration, I do think the 3DS version is, like, more well-designed, because it more clearly demonstrates what it is that you have to do. Whereas that's not as clear in the original. Not by much, but, like, it does kind of, like, linger on certain shots a little bit more that indicate, like, oh, this is how you're supposed to change the water. Oh, this is what that switch did. The original still does that, but not to the extent that 3D does, and 3D kind of makes it a little bit more clear exactly what you're doing. And from, like, a dungeon design standpoint, I do think it is a little bit better. I just don't like how it controls. But yeah, its problems exist, and they're ones that I can't ignore. But they just don't bother me. And all the, like, 99% of the complaints I hear people say are ones that I think actually kind of make it more interesting to me. But yeah, I'm willing to settle for D, because those problems absolutely exist, and if you're not like me, and there's, like, a very strong chance that you're not, this place isn't very enjoyable. It just kind of fills a certain niche that happens to be me.
Okay.
Stone Tower. This is kind of the opposite one for us. You put it in S tier. I put it in
B.
Did I put it that far up? I would have thought I put it lower, honestly. I would have thought I put it in C or D. Because, look, here's the thing. It's kind of a similar case to the Spirit Temple, where I like the idea of Stone Tower, taking all four of the masks, or, like, all four forms of Link, and puzzles relating to, like, every single thing that you're capable of doing. Inverting the dungeon is a really cool idea, and that is handled really well. The problem is that it's kind of the same issue as the water temple, where the gameplay of it is tedious as hell, because you are constantly going in and out of menus, changing what arrows you have equipped, changing what masks you have equipped, and playing the goddamn Elegy of Emptiness like 40 frickin' times. And it's just tedious. Everything you have to do takes forever. And I kind of want to put it in C, just because I might, maybe, if you make a good argument after I'm done ranting, I might bump it up to B. But as it stands, I genuinely do not understand why people complain about the Water Temple and then give Stone Tower a free pass, because Stone Tower does kind of all of the same things, except maybe even worse. Because not only do you have to, like, equip and unequip things, like the masks, constantly, you have to watch that animation every single time you do, you also have to play a song, which you had to do in the Water Temple, people complained about that, and you have to play said song, like, 10 times more in Stone Tower than you have to play Zelda's Lullaby. And just inventory. It's a limited inventory thing. If Majora's Mask had, like, 6 different buttons for you to map items to, this place would be S tier. It really would. Because the dungeon design itself is phenomenal. But actually playing it is such a slog.
Yeah, I can kind of understand that. Personally, I didn't mind it. I was able to look past that. I will say, I think part of the reason why people give the Water Temple so much crap, but don't for Great Day, Stone Tower Temple, is because Stone Tower just has more going for it in the first place. Like, just off the concept alone, using all of the items and masks that you've acquired up until now, the inverting the dungeon and traversing it standing on the ceiling, also the twin mode boss fight being one of the better ones in the game.
That's actually a point that I have never seen anyone say something generally agreed upon about twin mode. Literally every person I ask says something different. Some people hate it, some people don't care, some people love it, some people love the original, hate 3DS, some people love the 3DS, hate the original. I have never seen 2 people say the same thing about twin mode.
Personally, having played the 3D version, using the Giant's Mask and then grabbing twin mode and swinging him around like Bowser, that was really cool.
Personally, where I stand on it, I agree. I actually like the 3DS version. The original is not bad, but, like, it's kind of the same issue as Adalwa. There's not really anything to it. You're kind of just, like, you put on the Giant's Mask, and then they fly around, you run around and whack them. That's about it. or alternatively, you could just stand in the middle and arrow camp them, which I did my first time playing the game, and it took, like, 15 freaking minutes. You can do it that way, and I appreciate the idea of, like, having freedom with how you take on a boss, but that shouldn't be a replacement for the boss being interesting. And in Twin Mold's case, it kind of isn't interesting. You're just kind of fighting a large, normal enemy at that point, whereas the 3DS version actually kind of makes it more unique and stands out more. It's more memorable in 3DS, and that's something positive to say about it. That's just my take, though. Again, I've never seen 2 people say the same thing about that boss. So yeah, that covers Majora's Mask. Now we get to Wind Waker, which is I think the only game you haven't finished.
Is the only game I haven't finished. Before we move on to Wind Waker, where did we agree on Stone Tower?
I'm willing to put it in. I put it in C, but I think I am willing to bump it up to B. just because the ideas it does bring to the table are really good. Inverting the dungeon and using all of the masks, in theory, is fantastic. In execution, I'm not really a fan.
Okay.
So yeah, B kind of teetering on C, because I never look forward to playing Stone Tower.
Personally, if you just give me a really good concept, I will probably be too impressed by it to really care about how well it's executed the it's really bad.
I like 99% agree with that, and that's how I am like the majority of the time. The reason that specifically bothers me with Stone Tower so much is because, like, I never hear anyone talk about it. Normally, I would be the devil's advocate for this kind of thing, but I literally never hear anybody complain about it, and yet they say the same things about the Water Temple, and I don't understand why nobody applies it to both. But anyway, yeah, Wind Waker.